they say you never know what you got till it's gone. But I won't be the one to try that old saying on. And I've never been one to gamble, but if I had to, I'm gonna double down on this feeling I got for you. I'm gonna double down on your loving, gonna double down on you. Knows the life I live ain't worth living at all if you're not loving me too. Every day you wake in the morning, every day you deal me a hand, I'm gonna double down on being your man. Every day you wake in the morning, every day you deal me a hand, I'm gonna double down on being your man.
Out of Southern California, but now an Arkansas boy like me. How are we doing today, Josiah?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm fantastic. This has been a long time coming, man.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you having me on, dude.
Wouldn't be here without artists like you, so I'm super excited to have this. I know who you are, and I know your sound, and I know everything about where you've come in the past 3 years, but I'm really curious, and I think a lot of your friends would be interested to know about where did it start, childhood wise. And we went through the Marines. We also, again, now we're out in Arkansas. That's a very long journey with a lot of stops, but I'm curious, just maybe the first couple, did you have passions in high school that did not involve music at all? Did you have a different dream? Tell me about that raising you had. Yeah,
it's kind of like you said, a really long interwoven story and everything. Nothing too crazy, but grew up. My parents were pastors of a church.
Okay.
Grew up kind of like every other kid. Grew up playing sports and into all that stuff. My love for music really, I guess I didn't really realize it was there until I was about 10th grade. That's when I picked up the guitar. I actually was inspired by my dad had this AC/DC music video collection, and so when I was starting, I had a little loaner, or this little it was kind of like a beater electric guitar, and I was like, I want to play like that. So my whole kind of music journey didn't even start really in country music. I mean, I grew up listening to country. My dad was a big country music fan and all that stuff. But yeah, it's kind of odd. I kind of, I feel like it really clicked for me in high school. I stopped playing sports. And every day I got home from school and I was learning guitar and all this stuff. And yeah. And then, I kind of got into the worship side of things at our church. My sister was the worship leader at the time, and phenomenal pianist, vocalist, just an incredible talent that she is. And her she was dating him at the time, but now they're married and they have 4 boys. But her husband, his name's Will, and he was also a guitar player and songwriter, and he had been writing a bunch of worship songs. And up until that point, I never really encountered a songwriter per se. And so that sparked something in me that I didn't realize was there until a little further down the road. But yeah, I got thrown into the worship teams, in high school and everything, and just playing guitar, playing lead guitar. And I really, even to this day, I don't even really consider myself a singer. I like to sing, but my sister really pushed me out of my comfort zone to encourage me to start singing. And if it weren't for a personality like her, I don't even think I'd be doing music to this day. I mean, at least in this capacity, But yeah, kind of from there, just worship, like I said. I did school for a year at Ole Miss. to try to get a scholarship to become an officer in the Marine Corps, but that didn't work out. So I ended up dropping out, coming home, and enlisting, and pretty much kind of from there, music really wasn't a focal point. My whole life, all I'd ever wanted to do was be a Marine. My dad was a Marine, and so that was kind of like the focus. Music was always kind of like, it was always there. I'd be playing gigs here and there. In college, I played a couple with a friend.
Yeah.
And I always enjoyed playing music. I just a music person. I wake up in the morning, 5 a.m. and I'm blasting music. So it was there, and it went to the Marines, and I feel like, let me see how I should say this. So joined the Marine Corps, kind of, I wouldn't say got off track with God or with my relationship, but that really wasn't the focal point in my life at the time. And then until shortly before I met my wife, something radically changed, and kind of got my stuff back together, and kind of was getting involved more with worship again, and more with music and all that stuff. But yeah, so then I got out of the Marine Corps. My wife and I, we got married. We had our daughter when I was still in. Got out, had our son shortly after that. So they're 13 months apart. But I kind of got back into the swing of trying to play some gigs and trying to do stuff like that. I'm a huge blues fan, and so at the time, man, that's kind of what I was wanting to do as far as music was going, is play blues and some rock stuff. But we had a friend of ours who owned a brewery out in California. And he'd have me come play there every now and again. And but one time, it was shortly after I got back from deployment. I asked him. I said, "Hey man, do you guys have any availability to play?" And he was like, "Well, we've got this BMI licensing thing, and we can't have people coming in and playing covers anymore." And so I was like, "Oh, that sucks." So that was kind of like a gut punch, because I was like, man, well, I really want to play music, but I can't go play music, And so at that point, I was like, maybe I should start writing my own songs. And I was about 22. So like I said, I had been out of the Marines a little bit at this point, and nothing was really clicking, with songwriting as far as it goes. And, trying to write different genres. I guess I was trying to find like my niche, if you will. And so at that point, I was really diving into some of the stuff I'd heard growing up, with country music that my dad would be listening to. And something really just kind of went off inside me. And I was just like, man, this is amazing, And so just kind of going down the rabbit hole with, classic country music all the way up to modern guys who are doing more like the traditional thing. And I think I'm more of like a purist by nature. So like hearing the traditional stuff, really inspired me, And so I think, from there, I just kind of made a mission that I wanted to be a songwriter, and I'm still learning, as I'm going, but
we all are.
Right. Yeah. But yeah. And so that kind of led me to where I'm at now. As far as that goes, just kind of, like I said, I've never really considered myself an actual singer. I think I would ultimately like to call myself a songwriter, more so, But yeah, man, that's kind of a little bit of the journey, as far as music goes.
Perfect. And now we're settled in Northeast Arkansas. right? And we're raising Angus.
So we are just north of Little Rock, so we're central
Okay,
Arkansas.
Central.
And but yeah. So we've got we all our whole family moved out here as the we were part of the great California exodus of 2020 and 2021. So we moved out here to Arkansas January of 21. It was just getting hard to raise a family in California, and man, we sure love where we're at right now. It was the best decision of all of our lives. So it was my parents, my brother, his wife, and their kids, and then my wife and our kids. And so, yeah, we came out here. We're fortunate enough. My dad, he ended up purchasing a place, and got some cattle. My brother and I, we live a little, closer to town, and he's about, he's a little bit out on the outskirts. But yeah, so he's got a little spread out there, and we've got a small herd. So yeah, man, just Black Angus right now.
That's all you need, man. I love that. Yeah. Man, I've showed all around the state. I've been all around the state. I do love North Little Rock area, but I can't get past Northwest Arkansas and being raised in the River Valley. I absolutely loved it. I mean, besides baling hay with like 120,000% humidity, where you'd walk out at like 8 a.m., 7 a.m., and you would already be sweating, but you realized it wasn't sweat. It was literally just the humidity collecting on your skin,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
actually cooked you harder.
yeah.
So that I don't miss. But
Steams
just
you like a
everything
bag of
else.
crab legs.
Exactly. It's God, we're about to have a boil over here. That's pretty much what it is. But
Right.
all in all, though, I miss that area so much, and so I'm really happy though that
Yeah.
you settled in well and you're enjoying it because it's I'm not gonna say it's one of a kind because to be honest, it looks like a lot of the Appalachian areas, but I think being centrally located, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah,
But
the whole
circling
area is
back,
awesome, man.
yeah, it's incredible. But circling back to California, we want to go
Yeah.
back in. I know it might no PTSD, but but I'm curious, like what sports did you play growing up? What did you enjoy?
Uh, Baseball was I mean, that was my first love, I like to say. But yeah, so um, baseball, pretty much baseball, basketball, and football. I played basketball a little bit in middle school, played football a little bit in like elementary and middle school. But baseball was pretty much all the way up through 10th grade. Played every year. And then, so I stopped playing my junior year, and that was right after I had kind of repicked up the guitar
Hmm.
and got more into music. But I actually got into bull riding. I actually was in high school rodeo for a year,
Come
and
on.
so yeah, that was a wild ride for
Is
sure.
that what inspired? Is that where you pulled a little bit of inspiration for Fool's Gold?
Yeah, yeah, a little bit. I wasn't any good by any means. We actually we went to it was like the first night of the PBR finals in Vegas. So we were only 3.5 4 hours from Vegas, and my dad was like, hey, we're gonna go to the PBR one night. And like I said, I was a junior, and we got there, and I was like, I want to do that. And so we found a place near where I grew up, and we grew up in it's a more rural area of Southern
Hmm.
California. But man, there was a guy there who, I mean, he had a whole arena in his backyard, and just a bunch of people there would get together on Saturday nights, and so you'd pay $20 for to get on a bull, and I started training like that, and I rode in a few rodeos, California High School Rodeo Association, and I want to say is the California Junior Rodeo Association. But yeah, I did it for a season, and at that point, I kind of was like, man, I really want to join the Marines because that's all I've ever wanted to do. So I probably should stop doing this before I break my neck or something.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is you kind of followed the same path as I did, because I went to college for sports. That's all I wanted to do was sports.
Okay.
But I also knew I wanted to join the military, specifically the Air Force. But in South Arkansas, all we had was Army ROTC.
Oh,
And in my
right.
head, which you're probably gonna laugh, well, maybe you might relate, but I was like, in my head, I was like, when I join after college, they'll respect me so much because I enlisted, went through RTC, like
Yeah.
they're gonna like respect the hell out of me. And then I went to my first drill and I watched how they treated the gold bar, and I was like, oh, they don't they don't give a shit about who you are. They don't care about
Yeah.
anything. You got to earn it everywhere you go. I was like, so that was pointless.
Right. Right.
But I don't regret any of that time. It was just funny to me that I was like, man, those 4 years, they're gonna really help me, and it was
Right. Yeah.
pointless. It was absolutely pointless. But what was your not your MOS? I don't know what the Marines call it, but
Yeah.
your
Yeah. It's on my
position.
way.
Oh, it's still MOS. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What was
Uh,
yours? Tell me about that.
so I was in the infantry, and I was in a facet of the infantry. We were light armored. So we rolled in around in big old 8-wheeled vehicles. They're called LAVs, and
Hmm.
had a big old chain gun on the top. So it's pretty cool, you know. Not exactly what I wanted to do as far as the infantry goes, but yeah, I mean, I don't regret any of it. Made some of the best friends of my entire life, and it was a good experience.
Yeah. And what would you say your favorite and least favorite part of any if you did a tour or any training or anything like that? What would you say like? And it can even be surprising for some people if you want to do specifically like something you think would surprise folks. But like
Sure.
maybe you're what you really like look back and you really smile at, and then something you're like I would never want to do that again or even wish that upon my worst enemies. You know.
Hmm. Man, I mean, I definitely you form such good friendships when you're going with people when you're going through some of the worst experiences of your life. I didn't get the opportunity to see combat or anything. We only deployed. I did one deployment, and we went to the Far East. We were in Okinawa, mainland Japan, and South Korea. So that was right around when tensions were high between us and North Korea in 2017. So that was a little interesting, but yeah, I'd say that was the best and worst things about it was going through crappy weather. I mean, you're in the trenches, with these guys to your left and right. But that's also kind of the best thing about it is through those things like that, and everyone who's experienced combat, they could say the same thing, I'm sure. Which when you're going through tough times, you got the dudes to your left and right to kind of keep morale up, and so that was probably yeah, that'd probably be the best and worst times. um, there's there's bad leadership everywhere you go, and there's good
Hmm.
leadership everywhere you go. And so I think one of the things that I learned too is instead of griping about things, trying to see the silver lining, and trying to be more optimistic about things. But yeah, that was that's probably the yeah, I'd say that's the best and worst of it is going through crap, because
Yeah.
you going through stuff. I mean, you come out a little more mentally resilient on the other side as well, and so and you get to bring your buds along the way.
Yeah, I actually just mentioned that in one of my recent episodes on toxic positivity. A lot of times, right now in the dance community, a lot of folks want to talk about like we got to make sure dancing's fun, and it's like that's kind of like saying music should be fun. You know, if we're
Right.
not having like music is expected to be fun. The only time it's not fun is when we purposely make it not fun because we're seeking like skill, like like maybe orchestra. Like
Right.
that's probably not going to be fun. But what's crazy is inside of those experiences, a lot of people still find it fun. And so
Sure.
music naturally should be fun. Dancing should be fun. And I tried to explain to them that like even in bad times you can have fun. And I was explaining through
Yeah.
basic. Any person who's gone through the military, any branch, if you ask like would you go back and do basic? 99% of them would be like, of course. Like why would I not? It was like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
worst and the best time I've ever had. And it's only terrible when you're in it. When you're
Yeah.
initially in it,
Yeah.
it's the worst experience ever. Like
And
I was
it's
so
the funniest place you can't laugh.
yes, and it was like it's the anxiety you get,
Hmm.
because you don't until you recognize that the drills. the sirs, whatever branch is calling them, until you realize they're acting. You're like terrified, which is the point. But the
Oh yeah.
second you realize that they're acting, you're like, okay, I get this, and you just do your smoke and you get out. Like
Yeah.
that's it. That's all
Yeah.
you got to do. And that's what I try to explain to people is the fact of like stop focusing on fun. Suffering can be fun, and that's insane. That's
Right.
crazy. But this is already fun enough. Now we got to
Yeah.
do it correctly, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So continuing down that, your dad and your mom both worked in the church.
Yeah, yeah. So my parents were both they were both the senior pastors of our church that I grew up in for 17 years, and so they were in full time ministry uh, right before, or I'm sorry, they were in full time ministry a little after I was born, um, until pretty much, I mean, till this very day, still, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so they uh, they were senior pastors at the church, and then when they sent my brother and I out here, we my dad, they ended up closing the church down there in California, and with that, bought this building here in Arkansas, and it was an old grocery store, and my brother, myself, and my father-in-law actually renovated it. Not entirely, we subbed out some things, but yeah, we turned it into a church, and so my brother is now the pastor of it, and my parents are here. They're kind of like like elders, if you will, so they're able to pour into other people, and especially younger people coming up through ministry with all their wisdom that they've accumulated over the years.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I love that. And were you a normal PK kid? And sorry for anyone listening, preacher's kid. Were you like a normal PK that like got a little wild, but always like knew how to hide it? Like you're honorary, or were you actually one of the good PKs?
Man, I wouldn't say I was good. I was a little sneaky about things for sure, but you know how it is. I mean,
I feel like it
it's
comes with the
like
turf.
you're right, right. And I think that's one of the interesting conundrums about pastors' kids, and a lot of them kind of end up going off the rails because it seems like society puts so much more pressure on them when really they're just kids trying to live their lives too. And so what that ends up doing is pushing them away from ministry, from whatever, you know what I mean, kind of off the deep end. I've known a lot of PKs in my life who that ends up happening to, and man, we were really blessed growing up. My dad really got a hold of the grace message in about 2011 and 12, and that radically changed him, and it radically changed just the trajectory of mine and my siblings' lives. We're all in ministry to this day. I do worship at our church here, and
Hmm.
it's what's cool about that is we were held to a standard, a reasonable standard growing up. Like my dad was a Marine, so
Of
it wasn't
course.
it wasn't just like a, hey, you're gonna act this way because you're a Christian. It's like you're gonna act this way, or else it's not gonna be a good time for you. And so we got raised with a healthy amount of discipline, um, and I think that helped us a lot. But yeah, none of my siblings and I, we did our typical sneaky teenage stuff. You know how it is, and
Hmm.
but yeah, nothing too crazy. But definitely not definitely not like the best kids ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And would you say being raised by your dad as a Marine and you go into the Marines, would you say that you're definitely not hardened because you're still very bright and it's always a joy to like watch your posts and hear your songs and see what you do.
Thank you.
But would you say it like made you more gentle or it kind of numbed any of that harshness you had, you know? Because
Hmm.
there's like, for me, that's the three ways I see people come out. Like they never come out the same. Either the things they see and they experience makes them more gentle, they become numb to everything, or they become extremely hardened. You know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see you as like one of those two, and I'm curious what you see in yourself.
man. That's actually interesting. I don't know if I've ever even really thought about that. My demeanor, I'm naturally a little more laid back. I kind of always have been. Sorry, that was my boy.
You're good.
Yeah, I've always been more laid back, as a person. Um, and I mean, nothing really. I don't think anything really changed my disposition, if you will. I mean, I do get a little more. I do get a little more anxious here and there, and like, you know, just uncomfortable settings, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But some uncomfortable settings, it's like I'm. Some of them I get less anxiety because I'm a little more used to the chaos, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't think I wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't say I've been hardened, but
Mm-hmm.
but I definitely have taken. You know, my daughter is going to be 7 next month, or I'm sorry, this month, and my son will be 6 next month, and so we're right in the thick of raising kids, and I think being raised by somebody who was a Marine, and me going through that stuff myself, I'm kind of able to pick out the good stuff and kind of discard the bad stuff. As far as kind of the Marine Corps being in my family, at least for a short bit. But I'm definitely glad that I was raised with discipline. I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad that I got that also through the Marine Corps, because I genuinely feel like I was like I felt like my dad and set me and my siblings up for success. You know, I mean, not to each his own with parenting. I'm not gonna judge by any means. I just know what's effective, and so
Yeah.
the way we were raised and us raising our kids like that, man. And um, I'm grateful that I haven't been hardened, but just in ways where it's necessary, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe actually being raised with your dad, it kind of prepared you in a sense to be able to maintain more of yourself, but also like you said, get those heightened senses, still be aware of the situation, but still also know the harshness of reality,
Right.
and be able to see like I can remain that gentle side I have and actually I can grow out of it.
Sure.
And so that's really important. But that's I love piecing all that together now because everything that we've interacted, it makes sense. It makes total
Yeah.
sense, which also makes sense why we get along so well. And I mean, I give respect to where you come from, but you fit in well as an Arkansan, like very
I
well. But when it
appreciate
comes
that,
to
man. Everyone's been so welcoming with open arms, dude. It's awesome.
I'd, I've been sent a lot of things recently. I don't know what it is in the past year, but there's been a lot of interviews about states, and for some reason, Arkansas currently on social media is just like kind of like the I don't know how to describe it. I don't know, kind of like the scapegoat. If no one knows an answer, they kind of just say, Arkansas is the worst state or Arkansas is this, and everyone kind of
Yeah.
sends it to me as a joke. But I'm like, good, keep people out
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
like
Please.
people look down on us, and I'm like, that's the reason we're so small. Is there things you could fix? 1,000%. But there's
Sure.
there's 1,000 things that every other state could fix. The only difference is like we don't care about everyone else. We're just
Right.
focused, a bunch
Right.
of hillbillies living out in the mountains or in these plains, and we just do our thing. Like we're not too worried
Yeah.
about anyone else.
And I love it.
Oh, it's fantastic, and that's what I bet it's like I can only imagine how good it is for your songwriting and the peace you can get from it. And so flipping into that, clearly we have a background, like I don't want to say gospel necessarily because that is very distinct,
Sure.
but specifically with hymns, which I think is like half of gospel. Hymns is a huge part of that. And then mixing in blues, you appreciate blues. You're clearly influenced by a lot of the golden country of 50s to 80s, and then I see also a lot of Western. Because to me,
Yeah.
again, every artist I talk to, and even Beyonce would say, hey, genres are bad. And I think genres are great. You know, I think we need to make more genres so that
Yeah.
genres in the end don't matter. Everyone's trying to be like, oh, well, I'm just whatever I want to be. And I was like, congratulations. I don't know if I want to
Right.
come to your concert now.
Right.
Because if I see someone as a country artist, and I want to see country that night, I'm going to go there. However, if I want to go to a rock concert and I end up at a country concert, I'm
Yep.
going to be pretty pissed off if you
Yeah.
said you were rock or you try to claim or sounded rock and you aren't rock. It's like,
Uh,
what's going on, man?
I feel the
And we all
same
have
way.
expectations. It's natural, you know? And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm just curious where, like, you pull from, if any, there's specific artists that you're like, maybe an experience you had. Like, I always tell people my first experience with music that I remember, like, feeling music was my dad introduced me to Tom Sawyer by Rush.
Oh
And
yeah.
that was the first time I felt music. And it was kind of like you, like, my parents were like, only Christian music. We only listened to,
Yeah.
like, you probably know
Yeah.
now, Air One.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all we listened to. That's all that's allowed in this house. And so my siblings and I would actually sit out in the car and
Okay.
listen to the secular stations. And I
Yeah.
still remember, I can still feel those certain times that, like, we always got it before mom got in the car, but there was like 2 to 3 times where she opened the door and sat in before we realized.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't know what was happening, but all of us had like our feet up and we were kicking back, like not watching. And all of a sudden she's in the car and it's like, oh my gosh. But
Yeah.
for that to happen, and then on the other side, my first experience of like, wow, this is like music, I feel it, was Rush, you know? And so I'm curious with
Yeah.
you, do you like what experiences you have, what inspirations do you pull from? Like where do you like you would be proud of like or humbled, I guess I'd say, for someone to compare you to this person? Like just kind of a overarching 1,000 foot view of your music right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like to, um, kind of, I like to think of myself falling in the category of traditional country, and so I know that
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of broad, um, but man, yeah, I mean, like I said, I know that that's kind of a vast category, but for me, I mean, you look at the guys like you look at those guys like Eddie Arnold or I mean Marty Robbins even who, in their really early stuff, I mean they were playing all the typical like Ray Price sounding shuffles, you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
then, they kind of dip into like a full, Western like cowboy albums and all these LPs and stuff and so I like to I like to think that I want to go in a way of like traditional country where it's like on the same record you can have a shuffle like a real traditional like 60s sounding shuffle like a Charley Pride or a George Jones song, and then in that same album in that same breath, kind of like like a Western like cowboy song, but not like not venturing out of that vein, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But man, some of the my biggest influences as far as country music goes, I mean, I George Jones is my. I mean, he's still my favorite. I can listen to every single song of his and not get tired. And a lot of people, when you say George Jones, they think kind of like the '80s stuff, which is awesome. It's phenomenal. But I really, really his late '50s, early '60s. I mean, all through the '60s is absolutely my favorite. So him. I mean, Buck Owens. I'm a big Buck Owens fan. Merle Haggard,
Yeah.
of course. Charley Pride, love Charley Pride, and yeah, so kind of those guys where they were they were kind of, I mean, I guess you could say most of them would be in their prime in like the '60s
Mm-hmm.
era. Um, but yeah, those guys, man, there's something about the authenticity in their songwriting. I know, so a lot of people say George Jones, he could sing a song, but he never wrote, which is not true. He wrote quite a bit in those early days. Um, Merle Haggard, huge songwriter, and I think that's kind of what I aspire to kind of go down a similar path of, which is not just putting out you know quality sounding, to me, traditional country music, but also stuff that I've written, you know, and
Hmm.
because I think that's one of the things that I like I said earlier, I want to be known for, and that's, you know, I'm still working it out, working kinks out and stuff like that, and you know, and my music and all that stuff. But yeah, if I were to be compared to any one of those guys like Merle, Buck, George Jones, that would probably make my life for sure.
Oh, like, 1,000%. Yeah, I completely get that, and that's where kind of I see, like, that's why I kind of call you Western is to me, and that's where it's getting so difficult, and this is why I wish I had other country dancers to be able to sit down and discuss this with, because all I have is artists, and this is why I love doing this podcast, is because I get to sit
Yeah,
down with the people making the music and kind of relate more to y'all, because y'all might not always have the privilege of knowing the difference between a waltz and a polka, but if the
right.
second I describe it, you get it, you know, but country dancers don't always get that. And so when I call you Western, I kind of mean like traditional purist today. And by that, a normal telltale sign is the steel guitar.
Yep.
Because even like Cody Johnson doesn't use a steel guitar and everything. And I would say on the radio, he's probably one of the most traditional guys radio
Sure.
wise right now.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't want to say the most, but like he's a strong name that everyone knows. Of course, we could go into Appalachian country. We have plenty of strong guys coming out of the East.
Yeah.
But that's where I see it of our history. And it's crazy also. What's funny is you mentioned Eddie Arnold and Marty Robbins, both Western singers.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's the telltale sign of what I was saying. I'm like, yeah, you are,
Yeah.
you're Western. And then to me, what happened was after we had Bakersfield sound in the 50s, but the
Yep.
swing came out in the 20s, Great Depression, all that. And it's, again, what's funny, this is why I say we're tied together, because Arkansas, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana moved out to California. That's how
Yep.
we got the
That's right.
Bakersfield sounds, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, first we got Bob Wills, but then we had Bakersfield sound, and then they came back out east, right?
Yep.
And so to me, what separated Western from country was Western was more dance. Country, coming out of the East, was all about, it was gospel, blues together,
Yep.
right? And folk.
Yep.
So it was like constant songwriting. And also, a lot of them were call and response. So it was almost like folklore. And it's, again, that's why it's folk. But it's like, you know, I tell a story about what happened out in the mountains and you repeat it back. And it's just as a group, we sing it together because we were too poor for mics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know where the point was, but it seemed, I guess the 50s, the Bakersfield sound is the easiest way to say it. Right after, I guess, the 50s. But there was a switch where country kind of became the dancing. Maybe
Right.
it was Texas really stepped up because all the Texans came back. I don't know. But then all of a sudden, country became dancing and Western became the storytelling.
Sure.
Again, like Eddie
Yeah.
Arnold and Marty Robbins are great examples of, well, one, they have great voices, but Western isn't always about the voice.
Right.
The same
Right.
way Honky Talkin isn't about the voice. Honky Tonk's about the instruments. If you don't
Yeah.
have a clean band, you're
Yeah.
not going to make it a honky tonk, you know. But also half the time you can't even hear the vocals because everything's so loud and you're dancing,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So in the same way, Western was about like, tell me a crazy story, and that's why a lot of the best murder ballads come out of the West.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then it seems like now Western kind of died down around like the 80s. But it seems like to me Appalachian country took over the songwriting portion, and they
Right.
maintained that heavily with the folk and Americana.
Yeah.
And then country itself, like Texas country, even red dirt sometimes, became very dancey, honky tonk. Maybe that was after the 70s with Gillies.
Right.
And
Right.
so for me, there's this hard part where it's like, when I call myself a honky tonk and someone in like Austin calls himself a honky tonk, they're two very different things.
Yeah.
Because there's like Gilly honky tonks, and then there's like dive bar honky tonks.
Like hole
right?
in the wall honky tonk.
Yes. And so like back in the day, hole in the wall honky tonks were the actual honky tonks.
Yep.
But then in the 60s, you know, 70s, when Gilly started getting popular, all of a sudden Texas kind of took over and switched to that. And so that's the hard part for me to kind of find that unity. And I would love to kind of see after all that where you're like, yeah, I don't agree with that, or that's right, or I see it this way. Where, one, do you kind of see that separation between country and Western, maybe old and today? And then also where you see, like, I think using traditional is clear, because today country it would just be modern country, but you don't want to say modern
Right.
country because that's alternative. That's like pop country. That's national,
Right.
right?
Right.
Country's country, and then you have traditional, which is like it's not cosplaying. Some people do it, and that's the people I don't like following. There's people
Right.
who they wear the fringe and they do all that, and they're in like
Sure.
LA, and I'm like, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah.
You know, what are we
Right.
doing here? And it's weird, but I'm just curious where you see with genres and maybe the timing of stuff. You know, even with George, like George, I think in that '60s era was a great sign of even Johnny Cash,
Yeah.
a great
Yeah.
sign of that, like that mixing of country, folk, Americana, gospel, and then Western storytelling, that steel, that like that roughness together,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
made what we have, you know.
Sure. Yeah. 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 I mean, I agree with everything that you just laid out for sure. It is very interesting. It's very interesting. You know, like when I think traditional, I just immediately go to like 50s and 60s, and
Mm-hmm.
so when you think of the Bakersfield sound versus like the Nashville sound at the time. The Nashville sound was, you know, it was known for being more clean. I mean, they would have the you know, the Jordanaires and big groups of people like in the choir, so or you know, kind of as a choir supporting the lead vocal in choruses. You know, so it was and plenty of pedal steel and fiddle and all that stuff too. But it was just known for being more like more professional, I guess you could say. But then you know, then you compare it to like the Bakersfield sound, and it was a little more like gritty, like a little more storytelling in it, and just kind of a little more rough around the edges. But but at the same time, you know, I heard someone say that about the comparison between the two. But at the same time, it's like, you know, you take Tom Brumley was the pedal steel player for Buck Owens, and man, that dude can, you like he would make an entire song with just his part, you know what I mean, and just was able to make it sing, and I love that about the two,
Yeah.
you know, different sounds and all that stuff. But yeah, I agree with the country Western thing right now. Like a lot of the, it seems like a lot of the Western stuff I see right now is more of the, like you said, more of like the red dirt. So like, you know, you see all these bands and like the, you know, just kind of the way, like the way that it's kind of a little bit popular to dress like right now. You know, I mean, like the striped shirts and the, you know, flat bill hats and stuff like that. It's kind of like they're all kind of calling it Western. Whereas when I think Western, you know, I think like what you're saying. I think of those guys who were, you know, the traditional country artists at the time. But yeah, like you said, it's just kind of interesting. I make a lot of videos on, and there's just stupid videos of me just sitting there recording myself, and I just put a caption on it,
Of
and
course.
you
That's how
know,
you gotta do it.
just kind of stirring the pot, you know,
Yeah.
because I am a purist, and a lot of times it's out of, you know, good fun, but yeah, you say country to somebody, and they might immediately think Beyonce, or they might immediately think of Post Malone. Not disrespecting the guy, because you know he put out some good music, but yeah, I'm definitely more hard line on things, and like you said earlier, I mean, genres are good. Like it, not everyone on earth is supposed to like your genre. That's okay. Like your genre is supposed to appeal to a certain kind of people, because that's why it existed in the first place, or it's how it came to be in the first place. You know, with blues, there was a certain there was a certain period of time where that was like a thing, and when people would sit on the porch and sing the blues to each other,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there was, like you were saying about folk music, people in Appalachia and all this stuff, and you know, um, kind of evolving into kind of what it is now, and not everyone is supposed to love country music. Not everyone is going to love hip hop. Not everyone's going to love rock. And I think that that's okay. Like,
Hmm.
I think there's a beauty in that, you know? I mean, you can appreciate a type of music. Um, I'm kind of rambling now, but yeah, it just, it's funny when I hear someone say country and then I hear a trap beat in it, or I hear 808s, and I'm like, okay, is it, are we just trying to appeal to everyone? Because at the end of the day, I just kind of feel like what's the point? You could, and unfortunately, I feel like the modern country era is, they're just about the only genre that appropriates to other genres. So I mean, you don't have a punk band calling themselves rap, or you don't have a rap group calling themselves country. You know what I mean? But for whatever reason, and I think it's, unfortunately, the culture of Nashville right now. But they'll take, I mean, it pretty much any genre that it sounds like to you. It could sound alternative or like rap, and they're calling it country. So I don't know, man. To each his own. That's just me
Yeah.
personally. I'm just a lot more of a purist, I guess you could say.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. I feel like we could have a whole hour long conversation
Oh,
just
dude.
on specifically genres because I though try to look deeper and I try it. I mean, I don't know how much you felt it in Southern California, but like being raised in a town of less than 3,000, this is nothing new. It's the fact that these people, a lot of them think they can come in and do what we do because it's elitist. They think what we
Right.
do is easy, and it's not to say that like oh, you gotta work enough. It's not
Yeah.
gatekeeping. It's a fact of like, no, there's little things. There's little things that go
Sure.
on, and that's what I don't think people understand. With like, this is the only one thing I will ever say on this podcast about Beyonce because she did make some good songs, and also her halftime show at the Texans. And oh, who were they playing? It wasn't the Lions. Oh man, it was. I think it was one of the wild card games. She did a halftime show.
Hmm.
She killed. Some of
Really?
also her pieces she did, she called out certain things and it was so good. But for me, it feels more like a Harvard art project where it's
Right.
like it's like too deep. Like, yeah, I read the sign and I see all the stuff you're calling out, and again, you're giving recognition to great people, and like we thank you for that. But it's like it didn't feel right. And that's
Yeah.
even post. Like there's a like
Right.
I think he wasted a song with Hank Jr.,
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just like that's the song you pick with him. You
Right.
didn't want
Right.
to
Right.
even do a cover. Like that's the song. You got his attention and you chose to do it like kind of a poppier song. It's like to each their own, but it was just like,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
made
No,
some
I
mistakes on
agree.
that. But some of his songs, it impressed me because he would get that steel out and he would actually sing, and
Sure.
he also picked good artists to follow, and so that's the big thing I see is just it consistently is an elitist type thinking that um
Like, oh, I'll just do a country album. You know.
yeah, it's just like it's kind of well, it's the same thing of like tourists in any other country. They're like, oh well, I'm
Right.
gonna go to Mexico and say senorita and guacamole, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
like they think they can talk about Mexico when it comes up in a conversation. It's like, no, no, no.
Right.
You went to the resort.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You
You
don't
went
know
to
Mexico. You
you
don't
went
know
to
anything
Cancun.
about it. Yeah, exactly. And that's what it kind of feels like is people are like, I went to
Yeah.
Nashville, so I know country. But there's actually a wave right now coming over that a lot of bachelorette parties, like Nashville has seen a huge dive in bachelorette parties because now people are wanting authentic. I think it's just
Really?
the age of information. Ever
Wow.
since like the 2000s, we always try to flex that, you know more. And it's
Yeah.
like now I think after the Yellowstone era, people are starting to realize like, oh wait, like this was fun, but now like I still want to be here, but also there's like 10 million other people here. So
Yeah.
what can I do to be more quirky or like different? And
Yeah.
so now, yeah, they're starting to come out to Fort Worth a lot. We're seeing a lot of them. And we even got our first bike bar, the
No.
like the biking while you're on the bar. Yeah, in the stockyards. They also are doing like a
I don't
huge
know how
grant.
that is fun for anybody, because if I'm drinking a cold beer, the last thing I want to do is exercise.
Like the only reason that would work is if you were drinking super fruity drinks and you for some reason thought that you could do enough work to burn those calories off.
Right. Right.
But for me, I'm like, just walk. Also, we have a
Yeah.
massive hill in the stockyards. I feel bad for these people. Like that motor in that thing has to kick on hard because like
You're right.
there's
Yeah.
no way
Yeah.
they're
It
getting
goes
up
pretty
that hill.
steep. Yeah.
Oh, it gets real steep. And so it's a we're how do I say this? I'm very much in the middle because I get along great with purists like you.
Oh yeah.
Because I would even say there's even more purists than you who are more rude about it, that they don't understand. Like you actually can consider other people's sides.
Right.
There's
Right.
some purists, oh my goodness, they're just
Yeah.
gatekeepers. And then on the flip side, well, what's funny is parallels between the church.
Mhm.
Like those are a lot of Calvinists. And then on the
Oh
flip
yeah.
side,
Yeah.
we think, oh, it's just free. Like we can do whatever we want. We got a lot of Arminians. I'm
Right.
sitting here in the middle. I'm definitely not a molist. Like I am
Right.
not a
Right.
molist, right? But it's a fact of I'm like, hey, y'all have this, y'all have this. I'm
Yeah.
not saying if we meet in the middle we're perfect, but I'm saying, can y'all like stop separating? Because together
Yeah.
we can talk and we can actually figure stuff out. But
Sure.
I think country is just so broad, man.
Yeah.
It's
It is.
so broad. And it's good though that we have people like you and even like Corey Cross. Y'all just dropped a cover of David Allan Coe and George Jones, so I bet that was fun. And
Yeah. That was.
so I'm
Awesome.
curious when it comes to, and that's one thing I will say too, going into this question. On one side, I look down on covers because there are certain artists, I won't name names, but people have sent them to me, and I'm like, they literally don't have one song of their own.
Right. Right. Right.
And that's not to, again, say, like we talked about, like, again, George Jones, he did it for 10 years and then probably started taking on a lot of songs, like that were written by other people. You can, like, some of us can only write for so long. We only have so many ideas and then they get repetitive. So the same thing for George Strait. Like, he did it very early in his career. He just started singing other people's songs, All that to say, on one side, I'm, like, very much, like, we don't need to do covers. Like, if that's all you have, blah, blah, blah. But on the other side, for me, when we can reintroduce a song, even if it's the same styling, like I love when people can take a song and style it different, but to like Culture Wall does that a lot. He'll take a lot of songs and like Keith Whitley songs that are very country and then makes them very Western, but all that to say, to reintroduce a new generation, because I will say again, I wasn't raised on country music. I was raised in the country around country music, but I can only listen to Christian music and maybe some Hank Jr. at the family reunion.
Right.
So for people like you and Corey who would take a song by David Allan Coe and George Jones, there might be people who have never heard it before, and they get to go back and look into it. And so I'm curious, when you do those, like when you look for covers, is it more so you're looking for like the experience you had with that song? Are you looking for, again, what these people need today? Or are you kind of looking at like, what's my, just like the music sheet type thing where it's like, what's my vocal range? Do I feel like I could sing this? Do I feel like I could do it well? Like, where do you like kind of operate in that scene?
So as far as that particular cover that I can speak on, now, especially because we just released it, but I wanted to do that one because that song has a little more meaning to me. I mean, it's kind of sad to say that you can relate it to someone that my papa before he got sober. Just hearing all the stories of my dad growing up, and he was a huge George Jones fan, and he pretty much lived a lot of George Jones songs, and that one is no exception. He lived that one, and so when I first heard it, this was after learning, after my papa had been sober for 20 years, but it meant something to me, not just because I loved the song, but because I felt like I could relate to it. My papa, he ended up passing away. I think I was about 12, and so I didn't get to know him much, and I know this might sound weird, but it kind of feels like I can, connect with this song and what it's about and who he used to be, if that makes sense.
It's not weird at all. That's very natural and normal. Yeah. So don't think you're weird for that. Right. A lot of people do that. You just got the pleasure of singing it, but
yeah. Well, that was, like you said, I didn't really grow up, immersed in country music. Like I said, here and there, I'd hear Merle here and there, or I'd hear George Jones, randomly, but it never piqued my interest until, much later in life. But that song in particular was one of the first ones that I was really enamored by.
Hmm.
I think I was a junior in high school when I first heard it. My dad played it for me, and I loved how different George Jones and David Allan Coe's you know voices sounded on it. And so randomly I was shuffling through my country playlists on my phone on my way home from work, and that song came on, and I was like, I want to cover that with Corey. And because he and I had been talking for, man, it's probably been over, actually, probably been about a year and a half now that we've been talking about either, we started writing a song together, and we've been talking about doing a cover of some song. And he brought up Yesterday's Wine. And this was, like I said, over a
Hmm.
year and a half ago. But just a couple months ago, I heard that when I want to see if he wants to do that with me. So I sent it over to him, and he was like, "Yes, let's do it." I kind of felt like with that song, kind of both of what you asked. The song meant something to me, but also I could see how he would fit, like either David Allan Coe or George Jones's part. And I'm just a fan of both of those guys. So I sent it to him. I was like, which part do you want? And he was like, it's up to you, man. So I was like, I'll take George's part. You can take David Allan Coe. And, cause Corey does more of like the outlaw,
Yeah.
sound. And I feel like that really meshes well with what he's doing. But, it also kind of goes along, obviously it's, traditional country. Um, but yeah, so it was kind of both of those things where I felt like it'd be a cool song for us to do, and also it had a little bit of meaning.
1,000%. 1,000%. I still think you've done really well with your choices in songs. Again, the biggest ones that stick out to me, I will always pick Fool's Gold.
Thank
But
you, thank
also, I think the flow you have in Don't Bury Me
you.
is really it's like kind of those funny ones, and that's one of my big things I'm still waiting on. And you nearly did it before really the Renaissance picked up. But I think one of the big ways we can tell we're in the country Renaissance like peaked. One of them is that Brad Paisley type humor comes back.
Right, right,
And we don't really have anyone right now that
yeah,
has like, certain people kind of get funny in songs, and everyone country has always had puns, but Brad Paisley,
right,
there was something in like all of the songs he did, like
yeah,
alcohol or water
hmm
or better online, or
yeah,
even in his serious songs about like, letter to myself, but the classics of like I'm gonna miss her, like
oh yeah, yeah,
those. There's just a type of humor that I feel like a lot of us are missing, and I actually just talked to Cody Bolden about it, and the fact of I think we might find it soon, and like a lot of people do it because we're kind of at that point where people have stopped trying to prove themselves.
right,
The
yeah,
past like 5 years, it feels like everyone was trying to be the most country hick redneck dude out there, and now it's kind
yeah,
of like, well, everyone can do whatever they want as long as they're representing their area and their region well. Why does it
right,
matter?
right,
And that's why you have Sierra Farrell dressing the way she does because it's awesome. That's her
yeah,
style. Go for it. Then you have a lot of these Texas guys like Parker McCollum. Like he hasn't lost his limestone kid type feel, but yet he's changed those little key details to represent who he is still.
sure, yeah, yeah,
And then we also have, like we were saying, like Western folks who are still playing to the traditional look, but also adding in stuff. And I love the way right now we are so aware of our history,
yeah,
yet
yeah,
so creative with where we want to go. And we're so blessed to live in this time. And
yeah.
I'm
I,
like,
I
I'm so
agree.
blessed to have you here to be part of, I guess we'd say a songwriter singer,
Thank you, man.
to be a part of that movement and that change. And we just get to sit here and appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so fun to be able to do. But tell us, what do you got coming up next? Where can these folks find you on social media? Any gigs you got around Arkansas or out of state, anything like that? Let them know so they can connect with you.
Yeah, definitely. You can find all my stuff on every streaming platform: Spotify, Apple Music. I have a link tree, and it's on my social media. I've got the TikTok and Instagram, and it's just Josiah Spicer
Ooh, tech
Music.
savvy.
Yeah. I'm working on that myself, man. I struggle, but yeah. So we got a couple shows in May at Kings. It's in Conway, Arkansas, and then also at Cedar Lounge in Maumelle, Arkansas. Um, but yeah, so I'm working right now on an EP, a little 5-song EP, and yeah, man, I'm excited. It's probably be coming out here within the next couple months for sure. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. Well, I know it's not an easy life, man, but it's a pleasure to be able to watch a lot of what you're doing. And so press on, keep pushing in it, keep perfecting your craft, but also know that like what you're doing is more than enough for us. But I look forward to everything you're doing. Pass on the love to the wife and the kids.
Yes,
And
sir.
honestly, I'd love to get you back on just to be able to talk deeper on genres and music itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to, man. And like you said earlier, I'm blessed to be able to sit here as well with you, and I'm appreciative of your time and everything, and I'm just like I said, I'm grateful to have been on here with you.
Well, I couldn't do anything, literally nothing, without folks like you. And so it's my pleasure, truly. And I look forward to getting you back on. So all y'all stick around because who knows, we might see Josiah on here a lot quicker. But you
Yep.
enjoy the rest of your night, brother.
Thank you, sir. You too, man.